Lovely, so we're recording. So hi everyone and welcome to our webinar for this week, which is Claim Validation, Consumer versus Clinical Testing. So just to let you know, this webinar is being recorded and the recording will be sent to everyone who is registered afterwards. There's also going to be a chance to have a question and answer towards the end. So if you've got any questions, please feel free to make a note of them as we go. There's a Q&A box, so you can pop them into there and we'll answer those towards the end of the webinar. So this webinar, I think is quite an important one for me and Thomas because we get asked about this a lot. So as a consumer research house, testing house that Ayton Global Research is, people always want to know what they can say with the clinical claim, what they can say with the consumer claim, and when it's appropriate to use which type of testing. So we're going to try and simplify things for you today. So the agenda, we're going to look at an overview of claims in general, so why and how they're used, what types of claims you can make and how you'll substantiate them, obviously the difference between clinical and consumer validation. We talk about how claims can be used in advertising, so once you've kind of chose your right kind of testing for substantiation, where can you then use those claims. Thomas is also going to take us through one of his case studies. So you can see in practice how consumer research is used to validate claims. We're also going to touch on how those claims are regulated once you've managed to get all that testing as well. So a lot of content today, and I think it'll be really handy for you guys all to know. So yes, we'll introduce ourselves first. So Thomas, if you'd like to introduce yourself, please.
Thank you, Carys. Happy to. Yeah, well, I think quite a few of you have seen me or know me. I'm a market research professional, and actually I'm not addict, but at least this is actually my life being in market research. I've been in market research insights for more than 25 years, most of the time in Unilever, a company that I think most of you will know, in a couple of roles, local, regional, and finally global. I left Unilever about 8 years ago, started my own market research consultancy, and then came Ayton Global Research, and I met Sue. And realized that this is a company that I would have loved to know before, because they actually do what I think many people are looking for, which is very quick and simple and well-structured market research at a very, very affordable cost. So she was looking for someone who took over the German business, and I was happy to do this because I like it, and it nicely fits also in my other parts as a consultancy. So in a way, these two parts of my business complement each other, and I'm still happy to work together with Carys and the team in the UK. I think so far, for the time being, Carys, back to you.
Thank you, Thomas. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm the Regulatory Director at Ayton Global Research. So obviously I work with Thomas as well to help sort of look at the best designs that we can do for studies which are compliant with anything to do with regulatory. So I'm mainly looking at advertising regulations when I sort of go in the context of what regulations we cover at Ayton Global Research, because obviously the research that we provide is usually used for advertising. So any kind of regulations which affect what the service that we provide and how we conduct our research is what I specialize in. So I've been at the company for about 8 years now, started off in a study manager position, so got to know clients really well and how they're conducting their research and why, and then that's progressed over the years towards the regulatory role. So what I really mainly do now is webinars like this, and also I will work one-to-one with clients if you're kind of new to doing consumer testing, to show you how you can best design your research and your questionnaires and everything like that, to make sure you can use that evidence where you need to and make sure that it's compliant in the territories that you need to advertise your products as well. So to kind of start off, we want to talk about what a claim is and why you use it. So Thomas, do you want to give us an introduction?
Yeah, happy to. So claims, in a way, are used to market a product. You see them all the time. They appear on pack, they appear in communication. Whenever you talk about a product, I think a claim is the simplest and quickest version of saying actually what benefits do a product deliver. They describe the effect of a product. So what does the product do to you, and how does it help you, and how does it meet your needs? In a way, that should help consumers choose a product, because they will help you to stand out in a crowded market, because we have so much competition. And a claim is actually this should be concentrate on the thing that discriminates you from a competitor and where you are better than your competition. So they shouldn't even only make the product look better, but they should actually showcase why the product is better than the competition. Actually, we should rephrase this a bit. So in a way, they are vital in your product communication and in your selling the product, in your marketing. That's why marketing talks a lot about claims, but we come back to that. Only starting in marketing is a bit late. You should start much earlier about it, because in the end it's a matter of developing the product so that it can deliver a claim and that you have a benefit and an advantage versus your competition.
So we're mainly going to be talking about cosmetics today. I know most of you are from cosmetic background. So obviously clinical and consumer research can be used for a multitude of different industries, kind of anything that's part of FMCG. But we see it most in the cosmetic industry, in the kind of personal care industry, because it's where you see the most claims to make your product stand out. It's a very crowded market, and you really want to show what your product does and why people should choose it against your competitors. So really, cosmetic claims is what we focus a lot on in our webinars, but if you're not part of that industry, don't worry, it will still be very applicable anyway. But I just wanted to give the definition of what a cosmetic claim is as part of the Cosmetics Directive, so as part of the European Commission. Because again, I know a lot of you are either from Europe or you'll be looking to sell in Europe. But it just gives a bit of a setting the scene to what what the claims are that we're looking at. So basically, the claims are the benefits delivered by the product. So usually, when we're looking at a cosmetic claim, I sometimes get clients come to me and say, what claim should I be making about my product? Well, really, it'll be up to your formulation chemists, the raw ingredients you've got in your products, because the marketing claims that you're making should stem from the benefits that product is meant to do. It's very easy to sort of say, moisturizer should moisturize, but if you've got certain ingredients in there as well, which are also, nourishing, make the skin smooth, soft, they're the things you should be focusing your claims on, as well as the other marketing benefits as well. So they also said that in evaluating whether claims are appropriate, it's essential to consider the overall impression that the average consumer would have. So this is most important. So again, in terms of making claims, you need to really think about what that means to your consumer. Put it into your consumer's head. Do they understand what that means? Does it relate to them? Is it something they want to have from that product? You see it a lot with almost overcomplicated scientific claims sometimes, where actually it doesn't mean anything to the consumer. It doesn't relate to them at all. So you really need to put your mind into that consumer as well. And also it needs to not go kind of above and beyond what the impression is. So you can't sort of say, the skin will be the most smooth you've ever felt in your whole entire life. If you haven't had that evidence behind it, and you haven't really got that kind of, that actual work of the product, it needs to be really reasonable to what the actual product can deliver, and not what you really want to market it to deliver. So the EU Cosmetics Products Regulation also highlights common criteria for cosmetic claims. So they've got 6 common criteria, and this is a really good place to start when you're thinking about claims, because every claim should basically fit within these common criteria. So to kind of break it down for you, you've got legal compliance. So this relates to basically you can't use legal compliance as a claim. You can't say that this product complies with EU regulations for cosmetics, because every product has to by law. So you should avoid saying things that are to do with legal compliance with your claims. It's got to be truthful, so you can't say that a product contains aloe vera if it doesn't. We've seen this a lot. I talk a lot about the CBD industry at the moment. It's quite a hot topic for us to do with claims with CBD. And, we've had lots of watchdogs going to cover and find that there's no CBD in products that are marketing as CBD. Seems to be one of those ingredients that has kind of been a bit of a culprit for this kind of claim. It sounds really silly. Of course you wouldn't say that, but it would be surprising how many people do. So obviously you must be truthful with your claims. It must have evidential support. So everything that we're going to talk about today, whether it's clinical or consumer validation, there has to be some kind of evidence behind your claims. Again, it sounds really obvious, but you'd be surprised how many products are on the market even now that don't actually have any evidence behind their claims, and they're kind of getting away with it. But they can only get away with it for so long, and also it's just it's not very genuine as a brand. You want to make sure you've got that evidential support as well. You need to be honest. So, examples of consumer claims that we'd use might be 98% of 100 women agree. People might say, well, if 98% of 100 women agree, maybe 98% of 200 women would agree. So we'll put that into our marketing. It's not honest. It has to completely reflect the evidence that you've got. So always make sure that you're honest as well with the way you communicate your claims. It has to be fair. So an example for this is usually with comparison claims. So if you had an anti-dandruff shampoo and you tested it against a shampoo that wasn't anti-dandruff, it was just a shampoo, and then you said it worked better, it would have removed more flakes in that anti-dandruff shampoo, it wouldn't be a fair comparison. So you need to use it against a similar product that has the exact kind of effects and things like that. And informed decision making. So this is where I mentioned earlier, about the impression that it has to a consumer. Your consumer should be able to read your claims and be able to make an informed decision about purchasing your product. This is really as simple as that. We've also got different types of claims. So the CTPA, which is the Cosmetics, Toiletry and Perfumery Association, for those of you who haven't seen them before, they've got some excellent resources about claim substantiation, particularly for cosmetics. And they have a breakdown of the different types of claims you can make, and they give guidance about what types of research you should be using as well. So obviously this is a lot of what we'll be talking about today with clinical or consumer. So to give you a little summary of what those types of claims are as well, you've got sensory claims and product aesthetic claims. They kind of come under the same bracket. It's anything to do with what the consumer can feel or smell with the product, what it looks like. There's kind of overall initial impressions. It could be the packaging as well. So obviously they're kind of claims that you can substantiate with consumer research. Performance claims is everything to do with the efficacy of the product. Does it do what it says? If it says it's anti-wrinkle, does it reduce the wrinkles? And again, you might do that with consumer or clinical evidence. Ingredient claims is very simple. It's what we talked about earlier. If you say a product's got aloe vera in it, has it got aloe vera actually in it? But you may want to quote that. People often like to have ingredients, especially if you're using some kind of trending ingredient or something like that. It's really good to put those ingredient claims on there. Combination claims really relates more to if you've got a regime product. You often see it with hair care. I often see it a lot of hair care where you have, this conditioner works best when it's used with the same brand shampoo. So obviously you need to do a test to substantiate that. You can't say it works better if you don't have any evidence to substantiate that. So that's quite a common consumer research test that we do. Comparison claims, it could be to do with a competitor. You want to have a benchmark, you want to say it's as good as your competitors or better than. But we also see it a lot with formulations. So we see things like new and improved formula and things like that a lot. But you have to have some kind of comparison data between your old and new formula or you and your competitor. And again, we can do that through consumer research. Subjective claims and objective claims is literally the definition of what consumer and clinical research is. So subjective claims is something that's subjective to the consumer. So anything to do with their perception, anything that's their opinion, and it can't be proved by science, it's a subjective claim. I would buy this product. This is the best product I've ever used. My hair's never felt this good. These are all subjective claims. The objective claims is what you can only get through clinical research and through instrumental studies, because it's things like 24-hour hydration on the skin that has to be measured, where consumer can't measure to that kind of extent how well that moisturization is. So that's exactly the definition, basically. And Thomas, over to you for why we should validate claims.
Yeah, I had a look around, actually saw that Cosmetics Europe had published these Qualipa guidelines for testing, and in their preface they nicely say cosmetic claim substantiation should be an integral part of product development and design and not follow rigid preconceived standards superimposed after development only for the purpose of supporting the communication of product performance and benefits. So they clearly stated, actually, from the industry body, that you should think of claims at a very early stage in your development process. It's not kind of some kind of fancy marketing tool at the very end, but it's actually an integral part of your product that you should think of from the early stages on and develop throughout and make it actually part of your development process. And then, of course, part of this process should also really validate the claims, because you need to and you have to, and then you can really make them also on the market. Okay,
I'm going to control it.
Okay. Thanks, Carys. But what is clear, and this is actually what we are talking about today, is we talk about validation of claims. There are two main methodological approaches, so two major routes that you can decide at very, very early stages. And they depend, of course, on where you want to use the claims and what kind of claims you want to use. The first route is the sensorial approach. This talks about sight, touch, olfaction. So it's all really about the kind of things that consumers perceive or experts perceive. So this is really, in a way, also directs into the subjective claims that Carys mentioned beforehand. But it's actually what we are talking about here. This is really about what consumers can judge, and people can judge. Whilst we have an instrumental approach. And this is actually where we go into the laboratory. So we have in vivo, so which means on a human being. You can measure the depth of wrinkles, or you can measure how far your skin is moisturized or not. Coming back to Carys' example, can be ex vivo, which means actually you, for instance, take a strand of hair that you can measure properties of and how they can develop, or it can be even in vitro, which means in glass, so in somewhere in the laboratory that can really then measure things quite differently. They do not really reproduce the normal condition of the use of products, but of course you can do a very, very objective analysis of activities and properties in a controlled environment. And I'm sure you all have worked with this. This is of course common practice. And both areas have their value, and both areas have support specific different claims. And I think I'm going to show you some quick examples. So just some simple examples. Claims for clinical testing removes 99.8% of stains. So as soon as you go into these kind of percentages, exact percentages, then of course you have to measure them somewhere in a laboratory, or does not contain any traces of aluminium. You need to really analyze the product in depth. No consumer can tell you this. Hypoallergenic or 35% increased skin moisture. This is something that you need to measure on the skin. So there are quite a few of these things that definitely need to be tested in laboratory. Whereas in consumer claims, you often have these kind of, well, then tend to be a bit more marketing claims, revitalizes body and soul. This is or makes you feel younger. These are claims that, of course, can come up. Marketing can come up at a later stage. There's maybe no scientific background behind it, but it certainly makes the product look more appealing, and it helps you to sell it. Makes you feel more attractive or recommended by mothers. All these are claims that are very typical consumer claims, and there's no way actually of a scientific laboratory validation. But if we go to the next one, and I think this is the interesting one that is worth reflecting on. There are quite a few claims, and there's a big area of claims that could be either clinically or consumer validated, depending on how you phrase them and how you look at them. And this is actually the area that we also often discuss with our clients. Because they often feel, yeah, we could do it. Do we have to do it in the lab, or can we find a consumer test that also validates it, which probably is faster and cheaper, and in the end delivers the same results. So just some examples I took here is it reduces wrinkles around the eye. Of course, you can use the product and then go back into the lab and measure the number or the depth of the wrinkles around the eye and have a clinical proof that the product works. But you can also send it to products and have them approve the claim, so have them agree to the claim. So if you say it reduces the wrinkles around the eye, and if 80% of the people who have tested the product agree to this statement, you can very validly claim it on pack. Similar to cleans your skin, pour deep. You can analyze the skin and measure in how far it is cleaned or not. Into the pores. You can again also ask consumers to test it and see how far they agree to the claim. Or finally, moisturizes your skin. You can analyze the skin and measure the moisture in the skin, but you can also have consumers test the product and see how far they feel that their skin is moisturized. So what we see often is when we talk about the advantages of consumer validation. It is fast. you see that we have, with our test, we have often a turnaround time of about 4 or 5 weeks. So this is laboratories, depending on when you can book a time, might take longer. It's definitely cheaper. You can, at the same time, validate several claims. So you can go with different claim direction, but in a lab, every claim direction would probably require a different test, a different setup, whilst the same consumer can judge several claims at the same time, because it's just about agreement to a statement. It is actually, and this is one of my philosophy in market research, has always been test as close as possible to the consumer's life, because this is in the end what counts. And this testing product at home actually reflects the actual conditions of the products in use, and you know how they will perform there. So if they perform in a lab, it doesn't mean that they will also perform with consumers. And here you have, in addition to the validation of the claim, you have also the proof that it works with consumers. You can target a wider range of consumers, and also with us, for instance, you can really easily go in different countries in different languages and broaden the scope of the study, which also allows you to use the claim, have the claim validated in many areas of the world. So I think quite a few examples and few advantages. Carys.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, next. Back to you.
Absolutely. I think it's a really good way to summarize it. And I think I had a client not long ago who had a claim they wanted to make about several different signs of aging, and they wanted to get clinically proven. So I went to our partners and got the proposal for the different tests. But as Thomas said, because we can do different claims at the same time, our proposal was for one consumer study, which would cover all those signs of aging, but obviously they couldn't say clinically proven. But they could obviously say everything else about the claims. And the clinical studies, each sign of aging, which is about 9 signs of aging, had a separate test. So each one of those tests cost about the same amount as our one consumer research test, and had to be booked in at separate times. So I think it was a really clear example for me about, just by having that clinically proven, which probably wasn't going to speak to the consumers as much as just having the data for the signs of aging being kind of reduced and things like that. Was it worth the money? Because really, I know as a consumer myself, I look at the claims, I don't necessarily look for that clinically proven. Every consumer is different and every brand's different, but I think it was a good example of how you can really save some time and money if you don't sort of focus too much on getting those clinically proven words. But just a bit more information about consumer research then. So as Thomas said, it reflects the actual conditions of use. It's really important, but it also is a great chance for our clients to test their usage directions, I think. So we've had it before with products that have been sold in the UK, and then we do the study in China, and we have the usage directions translated into Chinese, but it doesn't make the same sense. It doesn't kind of relate to the consumers the same way. So we had some quite poor results from that study. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, because it means before that product was launched into that territory, that was tested, it could have had poor results, while being sold there rather than just in a small test. So it's really good to get that kind of feedback as well. But generally, as we've mentioned several times, it's about the consumer's perception of the product. So usually we're sending it to the product for consumers to test at home. There are other types of consumer research, but really most tests that we're going to conduct, 99% of the tests that we conduct for claim substantiation, the products are being tested at home by the volunteers and they answer an online questionnaire. So it really is the most relatable kind of research that a consumer can have about a product. As we've discussed as well, that they might be assessing the efficacy of the product on its own, or they could be comparing the products. So it's a great opportunity to get some benchmark testing in there, or look at some other formulations. Certainly, we've had clients that have had to change an ingredient in their product because they couldn't source that ingredient, or they found a cheaper version. And they just wanted to know if it worked as well as the products they're currently using. So there's lots of great ways you can research your product as well. But as we said, you may need additional evidence as well. It's something we're really honest about. If we feel like the claims that you want won't be substantiated just for our consumer research, you might also need that clinical research. We've got partners that we can recommend as well. So as I mentioned, there's not just the claim substantiation route for consumer research. There's a lot of other reasons you might want to use it, and it can be combined. Don't feel like you need to have a claim substantiation study and then a market research study. You can find out all of these things as well during the same time. So even if you're benchmark testing or looking at a new formulation, the winning product that you get can then be used, that data can be used for your claim substantiation. So it doesn't have to be a separate test necessarily. But it really is an integral part of new product development. There's several examples we've kind of given, whether it's usage directions or just getting the efficacy of your product. It really should be seen as a part of your product development, as well as, you know, those helpful regulatory reasons for getting those claims substantiated. It's a really good way, as we mentioned, we can do multi-territory studies and have a wide range of consumers. It's a great way of finding out what your brand perception is, especially if you're looking at a new market or a new key consumer. It's a really good way of finding that out before it's kind of too late. You can also get things like testimonials and reviews. So that's really popular, just to have a kind of review box at the end of the study and say, you know, what did you think about the product? What did you like the most? What did you dislike the most? Dislike the most, I always encourage as well, even not for testimonials, because the thing is, when you're looking at quantitative research, which is what we're doing, we're asking people about claims and if they agree with it. You might find that people are not liking your product and you just don't know why until you have a free text at the bottom. What did you dislike about it? It could be they hated the fragrance and it meant they rated it really poorly. So as well as getting those great testimonials about, you know, what you can use in your website, as you said, it's a good part of product development as well. It's happened quite a few times where you might have amazing product, amazing formulation, and they just don't like something about it. And then if we didn't have that free text in there, it would be a whole other study again to find that out, whereas it can all be combined in there. Things like packaging design and price points as well can all be put in there. As I mentioned, generally claim substantiation studies are run blind, so the volunteers don't know what they're testing. But what we can always do, and we do it for some brands, is we have, you know, all the efficacy questions or the claims questions in one part of the section of the questionnaire, and then at the end of the questionnaire we might have a separate section. So once we've kind of got their honest feedback, their non-biased feedback on what the product performance is like, we might ask questions about, okay, well, this is the brand, this is the branding we've got in mind. Does this suit the product that you've reviewed? Do you think this price is worth this product? And you know what the brand is, and you've tested it. And it's such important feedback to get for your marketing team before you go into launch your product. So I think I've covered all these kinds of points already, but obviously, you know, we're really looking at substantiating claims for the purpose of today's webinar. And ensuring that the product is regulatory compliant in your chosen markets. So as we mentioned again, we can do cross-territory studies. It's not just about finding out if your product's accepted. You may find that you need to conduct the research in more than one territory to make sure the claims are actually compliant. So my example for that is always the long-lasting foundation claim. So if you had a long-lasting foundation, you tested it in the UK, and you found that yes, everyone agreed it's definitely long-lasting, and so you marketed that product in your global market, and that was sent to Malaysia. Now, the humidity in Malaysia is very different, skin types are different. So who in the UK might have found it was really long-lasting because it might be in a cooler temperature, drier skin type. In Malaysia, they might find that actually doesn't last against their climate. So then your claim is incompliant because you haven't tested it there and you haven't reflected that. So I'm not saying that you need to test in every single country you're going to sell in. It could be crazy if you're a global brand, but you should certainly pick territories that are going to be representative of where your product is going to be sold. So you really want to target that key demographic as well. So that might not be necessarily about countries. Like we said, the good thing about consumer studies, you get a wider reach. You're not just looking for people that are in walking distance of a laboratory to go in and get a clinical test. And this is really common at the moment, especially when we're looking at brands being more inclusive. So we want to have a nationally representative panel of ethnicities, for example. So that's really great what we can do for consumer research, because we can target that national representative, whereas it might be a bit more difficult to get in a clinical study. So we've gone through some examples already, but just a couple of more examples of cosmetic claims through consumer research. As you can see on the side there, we're generally looking at percentage claims, and often, you know, kind of generalizing to sort of things like 9 out of 10 women as well. So obviously it's substantiating the claims you can use on your pack and everything like that as well. But the percentage claims always look really nice in advertising. And I think I've got some examples of that as well. I do. So once we've got those claims, I want to go over kind of where you'll see them. Where can you put those in your marketing? As mentioned, they're compliant anywhere. There can be a misconception that if it's a consumer study, you can't use that to substantiate your claims that are on your pack copy and things like that, but you absolutely can. You don't just have to use the percentage ones to be able to kind of quote that research. but it really is effective. And we've seen there's some really popular brands here that I want to bring out. So we've got Drunk Elephant, Philip Kingsley, Charlotte Tilbury. They're names that we're really used to hearing in the cosmetics industry, really popular brands. And these are all consumer perception studies that they've got for kind of claims, and these are all quoted on their websites exactly. So they're all percentage agrees. You can see that it's all sort of saying agrees, or that they felt. So it's a lot about wording when we're looking at consumer research claims, whereas obviously the clinical claims are very much matter of fact. This is what was measured, this is what we can say. But you'll really see that it's much more kind of about, you know, what felt, what appeared, what was noticed, kind of thing. But you can make some really strong claims as well. So certainly with Charlotte Tilbury claims, things like moisturizers for up to 24 hours. Well, as long as the participants have all agreed that the moisturization, their skin felt moisturized for up to 24 hours, we can sort of make the study design around that kind of claim and make sure we can agree with that. But yeah, so there's some sort of lots of examples of the claims that have been used there. Claims on social media. So again, really effective way of marketing and really effective way of using your consumer study. So we've got things like Skinny Tan. So they've got all of their consumer study claims on their Facebook post there, as well as a big claim. They're 9 out of 10. So you've got percentage and 9 out of 10 there, which is really nice. We've also got Temple Spa, just one claim, one really big claim they wanted to have for that product. Just 91% said their skin was left feeling intensely nourished, and really helping them sell that product. And what's quite nice about using one claim at a time as well, you can kind of put that out as different posts, so you're kind of bringing up a bit of hype about your product as well. So it's really nice examples there. I also want to talk about how you can use consumer research for shopping channels. Lots and lots of examples for you. So I'm actually going to show you a quick video. So consumer research can also be used on places like QVC. I always have to do this really fun thing where I work out how to share the other screen. Here we go. So I'm going to show you this really short clip. That is not the right one. I told you it's not going to be. Right, that should be sharing now. Lovely. So yeah, shares a really quick clip about how consumer research has been used on a shopping channel.
We're looking at Jessica put it on, but I know that you've done research on whether or not this actually produces results.
We have, and again, I think pictures said 1,000 words.
Yeah.
Can I show you? So here's the results, and then I want to show you the before and afters. So in a consumer study after 2 weeks, every single woman said that the texture of their skin was smoother.
That's
every
incredible.
Single woman.
You can't get every woman to agree on where we want to go for dinner.
I know.
You know, or what movie we want to see,
know.
right? You got to do like Duck, Duck, Goose, or I don't know. You have to do
95%.
Rochambeau, paper, scissors, rock. Sorry. 95%
said it's balanced and not oily. But again, whether you have oily skin or dry skin or combo skin, this is going to be great. After 4 weeks, every single woman said that their skin had a healthy glow and that the appearance of their skin was brighter. That's what exfoliation does for you. 95% said that the skin tone was more even, and 90% said that the skin felt hydrated, balanced, supple.
So the press is talking about this Allure.com.
Great. So as you can see, they're very good on there as well, really building up some hype about those products. But it's excellent data there, as you can see. And then they've only got that through a consumer study. They didn't have to get that through a clinical study. And they were able to use that in their marketing. And of course, as I said, they're very good at extra hyping it up. But I think it really resonates with consumers. So it's an excellent way to use the data. It's important to note that all script on shopping channels is substantiated as well. So they're not kind of, you know, they're talking for about half an hour about these products. But actually that's all come from research, whether it be clinical or consumer. So it's really important if that's kind of the way you want to go. You need to make sure you've got some really good evidence behind your claims. And they will ask about you have to provide all the research report and everything like that to them. So you want to get some really nice research if you're going to go down that route. So we're going to go on to a case study shortly, well, in a minute, Thomas. But I just wanted to kind of set the scene for compliance here. So like I said, it's kind of clinical or consumer research route that you do. But there is always some legislation behind the reason why you need evidence anyway. And the European Advertising Standards Alliance, so this is a European case study that we'll look at. They say that you need to be able to provide your evidence for your direct or implied claims, basically when you're asked them from the ASA. So if someone complains about your product and you get asked to provide the research, it needs to be produced without delay. So again, it's just really driving home how important it is to have this kind of research as part of your product development, because people often have their product on the market and go, oh, we're getting quite popular now, maybe we should get our claims substantiated. It's such a risk, because what if you can't get those claims substantiated and you've been selling those products? It's really important to know that you need to get that evidence without delay. So over to Thomas for our case study.
Thanks, Carys. Yeah, actually, I had one of our clients coming to us and said actually that we have a newly developed eyeliner, and it has been developed to last specifically long, and we want to prove that this long-lasting claim is feasible. They had already gone to a lab and realized that this was probably taking a bit too long and maybe too expensive, and they were looking for a better alternative. Also, actually, to see is the overall quality of the eyeliner good enough to bring it out to the market. So we discussed this at length and came up indeed with not surprisingly, with a good consumer test that we did with them. And it looked as follows. Can I move? Okay. It was in Germany. We did a simple single placement study where we had these eyeliners sent to women who were testing them for 14 days at home. We had a split in 3 age groups, so a young one between 18 and 25, 26 to 39, and 40 plus, so that we have different skin ages also to make sure actually that they deliver on. And of course, all other recruitment criteria were the typical one: people should be healthy, should have no allergies, no skin issues, which could distort the results. So these were all then fairly well tested. So we sent out the products, and I'm sharing with you some of the key results. The first question was actually, how do you rate the product during use, just to get a feeling for, is this a good product or not? So we had a kind of typical niner scale from very badly to very good. And over here we've got you see very, very positive results. You see that I think there were about 2 people who didn't really like it, but 97% judged it very positively. So this was a extremely well perceived the product. So definitely a good product, which is also reflected in the purchase interest. So the second question, typical question also, how likely would you be to buy the product, assuming the price was acceptable? We see that 91% show some purchase interest, and even better, if you take the 8th and 9th, which are the highly interested, and you've got 2/3 who have a high purchase interest, so are very, very likely to buy the product. So definitely a good product. But now about long lasting, and we had to some discussions and decided to approach this long lasting issue in several ways to see which one in the end works best. And the first one was to say actually, how long does the eyeliner last? So we said, does it last less than 4 hours, 4 to 8 hours, 8 to 12 hours, 12 to 16 hours, more than 16 hours? So we gave them a range of times that it lasts. And the hope was that the majority of people, the vast majority of people would say it would last 8 hours or longer, which was not fully achieved, because we would have said the aim was to have 2/3 saying 8 hours or more. This was not exactly there, but it's definitely more than half, but not really as strong a claim, and not really as strong a validation as you would have liked it to be. But fortunately, we had some more ways to look at the long-lastingness. With the question of applied once, the eyeliner stays the whole day, because in the end, that's what it is about. An eyeliner should stay the whole day. It doesn't need to stay 24 hours, because we can assume that at some stage, person also goes to sleep and it doesn't need the eyeliner anymore. So if you put it on in the morning and it lasts until you get home from your party or whatever, it's probably long enough. And we saw with this claim, which means staying the whole day, we had an agreement of 80%. So 4 out of 5 women say it lasts all day. And you see actually over here a very, very strong agreement also at the very end. That 40% even fully agree with this. So a very strong agreement to that statement. And with even another way,
Oh, sorry.
With an even another way of looking at the how long does this last, where we ask the question, the eyeliner keeps longer than others I know. And also here you see that three quarters of the people agree to the statement. So it's definitely an improvement versus the competition. So people know their eyeliners, they have their eyeliners, but this is definitely an eyeliner that lasts longer than other eyeliners on the market. So definitely an improved version and a good proposition that is validated. Okay. We had another look at, we already saw high purchase interest and high overall acceptance. But we even went one step further and was actually, would you replace your current eyeliner with these products, which is the toughest way of asking about. People are really interested, because you might like the product, but it still doesn't mean that you change your habits. But here you saw that 60% are highly likely to even replace your current eyeliner with this product. So this product definitely has a good chance in the market to be established once actually people get to know it, and you can use the claim as a validation, the proof that it works. So next one. So just to sum up the results very quickly, the eyeliner was very, very positively received. People like it. People would replace their current eyeliner with it. We have clear evidence that it lasts longer, and it lasts longer than existing eyeliners on the market that people are currently using. So we could definitely give the strong recommendation to launch the product and to use the appropriate claims in communication. So I think a good success story, where at the same time you proved how effective the product is, you validated the claim, and you also showed that it has a strong potential position in the market, and it can stand out versus competition. So I think the client could be happy at the end with these results.
Excellent, thanks, Thomas. So I want to touch on, once you've got all your claims and everything like that, I just want to touch on how it's regulated. For those of you that don't know, I think most people are probably quite confident, but I think it's always something to think about and something to always come back to when you're making your claims. Talking about compliance and regulation, think about who's going to be regulating those adverts, and how that all kind of works. So most advertising is regulated by ad self-regulation. So it's basically a way for the industry to be legal, decent, honest, and truthful. So basically the industry is supposed to regulate itself in that kind of mind. So any advertising industry, everyone should be following the code of conduct of advertising and should be conducting their adverts in that kind of sense. But there are ways to approach it if people aren't doing it that way. So people that should be aware of this are any advertisers who pay for the advertising, the advertising agency is responsible for its form and content, and the media that carry it. So often it's the brand that kind of is in charge of all of that, all of the content, and who are paying for the advertising. But sometimes people use third party as well. And even if you're a third party advertiser, you need to be aware of it, because if you're putting those adverts out there, you fall under the kind of eye of the ad self-regulation. So every country has, well, most countries have their own ad self-regulatory organizations. So I would always recommend to have a look if you're advertising in a certain country as to who that is. But there's also some other information there as well. But essentially, it's a platform for people to complain. So as we mentioned, it's self-regulatory. So there's no one out there policing these adverts as they go into the market. It's trusted that you follow the code of conduct, and it's up to your competitors or your consumers to make complaints about your product for that to kind of get found out about. Some countries are different. Some of them have federal agencies. For example, the USA, they've got federal organizations. They're not self-regulatory. So again, do have a look at it. But it's really important, because obviously if you're putting adverts out there that don't have any claim substantiation, that's when you're going to be really exposed to having your adverts complained about, because either your consumer's going to use your product and say, this didn't moisturize my skin, I'm going to complain about it, or your competitors might find claims on your product that they don't believe that you've managed to substantiate. Usually happens when they're really strong claims. So, if things that are maybe attacking them in a competitor level, but also if something like 24-hour hydration, and they've only managed to get 12-hour hydration, they would probably complain about your advert, because they wouldn't understand how you've managed to substantiate that claim. So it's really important to be aware of. also might be important for you to be aware of if you think your competitors aren't substantiating their claims. Do put in a complaint. It's always a fair thing to do as well. But just to give you like a couple of examples there of where you can start looking for these organizations, you've got the ICC, which is the International Chamber of Commerce. They've got a framework for ad self-regulation, which countries can adopt. So they've got on their website, I think it's something like 52 countries that have adopted it now. So that's a really good place to start looking, because you can see who those countries are and you know they're all kind of following the same framework. So if you're advertising in all countries that are using that framework, you know they're going to have a really similar code of conduct, which is really helpful. There's also the International Council of Advertising Self-Regulation, or ICAS. So they were set up by the European Advertising Standards Alliance, but they are a global organization. So they're essentially a council for all of these self-regulatory bodies to come together, share kind of code of conduct, share a way of working, but they also share news updates. So I found them really helpful, especially during COVID, because they were putting out news updates which were applicable in every country that is part of that council, to do with things like COVID and things like that. So they're really helpful resources. It's also got all of their database of who's part of ICAS on there. So again, if you're not really sure about how to find out who's regulating adverts in a country you're advertising, you can have a little look on there and see if they're there as a country. I also want to talk about product reviews. I don't want to talk about a lot at the moment, because it's something that I'm concerned that industry is using in sort of claim substantiation, basically, where brands aren't getting their claims substantiated, and instead of relying on consumer reviews to make those claims, or not even making claims about their products, sorry, but they're using consumer reviews as claims. The problem is, if you've got loads of reviews and testimonials, you need to then have evidence to substantiate all of these claims as well. So this is from the Advertising Standards Authority, who are a little bit of a leader when it comes to advertising self-regulation. So they're quite a good place to look at. They follow the same, you know, they're part of the EASA, they're part of ICAS. So yeah, certainly for me in the UK, obviously they're a go-to resource. But again, like I said, a lot of these countries are sharing these same code of conducts. So just a bit of a kind of looking out there. So don't rely on your consumer reviews. You definitely need your claims substantiated as well. Sorry, anything that's kind of in marketing communication. So just a little bit there for you. A little bit of further advice for consumer studies, because we've talked about, you know, why you should use consumer studies, but a bit of extra guidance for you. So we always say a panel size starting at around 100 responses. This is really variable, but it's just a kind of guide, because I often have people who haven't done research before saying, you know, what's the kind of ballpark of responses I'm looking for here. So it can be smaller depending on the claim. If it's, you know, if it's quite a direct claim, it's quite a direct product, it's something that's quite commonly out there. But obviously if it's a stronger claim, you'll definitely want about 100 responses. Still might be more than that, because you may have things, as I mentioned earlier, breakdown of ethnicities. If you had a really small panel, you would only end up with a tiny amount of each ethnicity on your study, and it's not enough to then substantiate as suitable for everyone. Same with countries. You wouldn't have 100 responses over 5 different countries. There would not be enough data from each country to substantiate those claims. So again, it's a rough guide as a start, but we can always help with that information as well. You need to inform your product liability insurance provider that you're using an external supplier of consumer studies. So we've got product liability insurance to make sure that anything that happens with our studies obviously isn't going to get anyone in trouble. But you'll need to let your product liability insurance know as well. All samples need to have been safety tested. So people often ask me, what level of safety testing do I need to have? It's as simply as much safety testing as you need to release your product on the market. So every product's a little bit different, all ingredients are different. If it's a child study, it's different. There's lots of things in there. So whatever you need to have to make sure that you could sell your product on the market is what we would need for us to send it to our consumers, because we're sending it to them in home to test on their own. So we really need to make sure they're safe as well. I mentioned earlier that for claim substantiation, you want to have blind studies, so debranded samples or plain packaging. This makes sure there's no bias towards your results at all. Most advertising authorities would require this with their kind of evidence that is submitted. There's odd cases where you might not have it debranded. It might be that you're getting feedback on your packaging itself. So obviously that's really important to have it branded. But as a general rule of thumb, I would always recommend to have things debranded. Your questionnaire design will always need to support your claims. So Ayton Global Research is fully trained in questionnaire design. So it's certainly something, if you've not done before, we would obviously recommend to come to us for support. But we can also review your questionnaires if you designed one previously to make sure that it will support your claims as well. And as always, you can always seek professional advice from a research agency, hopefully us, to make sure that everything you're doing is going to be working for how you want to use your research, basically. So Thomas, if you could just summarize our webinar today.
Yeah, just a quick summary. I think nobody will now disagree with me that claims are vital to market your products. I think that's why we are all here. The development of validation of claims should not be a last-minute marketing effort. I think this is something that I think I've mentioned a few times, but I would like to repeat that. Really successful companies think of it at early stages and build it into development cycle to make sure products you have the right claims and you can validate them at a later stage. But also, in a way, what we also see is the other way around, that R&D develops something that they might claim, but in the end it's not consumer relevant. So I think in the end it's a matter of close cooperation between marketing and R&D to make sure you know what interesting claims are to consumers, what can differentiate your product, and then make sure R&D can deliver the right product that can really deliver on these claims, and then we can validate them. I think Carys has made very clear that they have to be validated, and why this is not only a nice thing for us, but it's actually a must in the industry, and you are legally required to validate your claims. You can validate with consumers or in a lab. It depends on the claim, as we've seen before. And I think the interesting thing is, I think, where we can also step in the discussion all the time, is many claim directions can be designed to be tested either way. And it's worth thinking about these claims, what is more appropriate and what's better for you in the end. And one advantage consumer testing has, they tend to be faster, cheaper, and more flexible. So it's very often an easier way to go into consumer testing if it's feasible for you than going into a laboratory testing. So just a reminder to you to have this in mind and think of alternatives that might make your lives easier and deliver to your business. So that is a quick summary.
Lovely. So I'm just going to do a little summary about our company as well for Ayton Global Research before we go on to question and answer. So if we haven't convinced you yet that you should be using consumer research, hopefully I can convince you to use our company as well. So we're an award-winning research agency. We've won awards for international business and family business, things like apprenticeship schemes. We've talked about product liability insurance a bit. So not every insurance research provider has got full product liability insurance, but we do for every single country we operate in. So this really gives you a lot of security. If something gets missed off, if you give us the usage directions incorrectly and it says to use the product every hour instead of every day and people get irritations to it, we're completely insured against these types of things. So really importantly, kind of related to that, we've got undesirable event reporting. So that runs alongside every single study we do. This is really important to do the Cosmetics Directive as well. There's part of the European Cosmetic Directive that say you should have undesirable event data which reflects the actual conditions of use, as we mentioned earlier. So obviously, it's very good to have your safety test, but you also want to get some feedback from people actually using your product, and if there's any undesirable events reported there. And this is all made in accordance with the Cosmetic Vigilance Act as well. So people have an emergency number to be able to call us on, and we can give your responsible person or whoever you want kind of access to all of that as well. It's all in real time. So the minute someone submits an undesirable event, they can access that through their client login. We are fully compliant with GDPR. Of course, we have to be. We're a European company. But this is really important in terms of how we care about our volunteers' data and how we care about your information that you've given us as well. So we've got an ISO 27001. So we have a full audit for that every year. We've also got ISO 9001, which is to do with quality assurance as well. So it lets you know we're kind of really thinking about the quality of what we're providing to you. We're a partner to the Market Research Society, so our research is all done in accordance with their code of conduct, which is mainly about having proper conducted research, things like I said, we're MRS trained questionnaire design, but also making sure the research is ethical as well. We provide regulatory advice, as mentioned, as regulatory director. I'm always able to provide you with advice where I can, or signpost you to people and companies that can give you further advice. You get your own designated study manager, which I think is really important for any brand that is or company looking to do consumer research, because they'll get to know who you are, what your procedures are for consumer research, what your claims are. Everyone's got their different way of working, and you'll get one member of staff who's assigned to you and who will work with you in that way. So, question and answer time. I hope we've got some questions today. I think there's one that's already come in.
I see there's one question that's come in. Are there studies showing which types of claims are more likely to entice the consumer? Which is an interesting question. We may try to give it an answer. First of all, I think that the consumer doesn't really exist. There are quite a few out there. I think it depends a lot on what kind of product, what kind of claim, what kind of consumers you are talking to. There are probably the very data and very scientific minded ones who react more to a laboratory claim. But there are also quite a few out there who probably react a bit more to slightly more emotionally phrased claims. So I think you can't generalize this. But by the way, of course, this could also be part of a consumer test to check on claim alternatives to see actually which are the ones that resonate most. And I think, I'm not sure, Carys, if we've ever done this, but I think it would be a very interesting approach to include in a study an alternative of claims and having a ranking or whatever to see which way of phrasing it actually is most enticing. So to answer that question, we can't really generalize an answer, but I think we can probably the emotional ones will resonate a bit more with most people than the very scientific ones.
Absolutely, I completely agree. And I think every brand's different as well. So there's certainly brands that we've worked with that are very clinically driven, so the consumers are more clinically driven. There's not ever as well, you don't necessarily need to choose one or the other. Many of our clients have clinical and consumer research. Because there's some claims they want to get through their clinical and they can advertise that in a clinical way, and some claims they know they can get through consumer as well. So it really depends on how you're marketing your brand. I think that's kind of how I would sort of say that's what stands out to the consumer. And as Thomas said, we could probably run 1 million studies and probably have different results about what's more kind of comes out to entice the consumer. But as mentioned earlier, when we say about brand perception and things like that, there's no reason why we couldn't add that on in the study and say, yeah, which claim would entice you to buy this product as well. So I hope this answered your question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Thomas, you go for it.
No, there's another one which I think is very much about the regulation one, the next one. While advertising claims seem to require substantiation validation, are there any ways to assist in ensuring social media stars are truthful, or is there very little regulatory oversight there?
Okay, so basically anything that's happening on social media stars, so it's a very good question, because this is something that as a regulatory director, you grind my gears. But actually every Instagram star and everything like that is supposed to be quoting research claims. So they can have an opinion, that's absolutely fine, but there still needs to be claim substantiation in place. I think that a lot of people try and skip over that to make sure they can get social media stars out there. However, there are products that have been out in the ether. There's a certain hair care brand which got into hot water last year with the ASA because they were getting celebrities promote their hair growth product. And they got quite bad press from it because it turns out they had no claim substantiation. So a competitor complained about their adverts that were on social media. So you might think that these influencers are out there, as a separate advert, but you can absolutely complain about those adverts as well. So it really comes under the same rules as well. So like I said, I think it's a great way of marketing, but don't try and skip over the claim substantiation as well. Make sure that you've got that before you put your products into the kind of social media area, because if you don't have those claims substantiated, they will get withdrawn. And as mentioned, it is really bad press when it happens. This particular hair brand was plastered all over magazines and newspapers and everything like that to say, this things like Love Island stars are selling this product, and we've got no evidence to substantiate it. So yeah, the same rules definitely apply.
There's one question coming in the chat. Do you offer waterproof testing? Should this be a clinical study or can it be a consumer study?
So I think we both have opinions on this. This is the funny about consumer research. You can use wording a lot. So waterproof testing itself, if you're going to say a product's waterproof, probably need some kind of clinical evidence there. However, there's no reason why you can't have agreement claims. So we've had it, we conduct studies for a brand quite regularly, and they have things like mascaras and foundations, and they like to have lots of claims about it being things like sweat resistant, water resistant, things like that. So what we do is we ask the consumers to use the, put on the mascara, whatever, go for a swim, go for a shower, and then rate the product afterwards. And if they say it has stayed in place. So they might also have clinical research as well to make the stronger claims to say this product is waterproof, but you can use consumer research to have that kind of claim in place where you might say 98% of women agreed that this product was water resistant. So if there's anything you want to add to that one as well, Thomas?
Yeah, no, definitely couldn't agree more.
But yeah, I think that's definitely the case. I think I always say with any kind of claim that, and Thomas mentioned it as well, you probably find that you can always say it, you can probably use either kind of research, but it really just depends on how you're going to word it. And what the kind of things you want to say. If it's a measurement, it will always be clinical, but if it's a perception claim, you can always use consumer as well.
And you realize in the end, with most consumers, the message will land. So which means the claim is validated. It's only a minor way of wording it differently from our side, but it leads in a completely different direction of validation. But still the message that lands with the consumer and that the consumers understand will be more or less the same.
Absolutely. And it's being honest as well. I think it's being really transparent when you've got claims out there.
Yeah.
That's what the ASA are worried about. So when we've had it before with certain claims that could all be very considered clinical, and I've talked to the CAP, which is a really helpful it's a copy advice team for the ASA if no one knows it, and they've said you can say that, but you must say self-assessed. You've got to say self-assessed in your advertising, and then we're able to say that kind of thing as well. So got another question in. So is there a percentage that captures a consumer's eye, like anything over 90%? Do consumers in general not even buy anything that has just over 50%? Does that make sense? What makes a strong claim? So basically, we have set into our system a pass mark anyway. So generally, we set that as 66% because we think that's a statistical majority. So it makes sense for any claim that passes to have to be at least 66%. A lot of our clients like to have 70% as their pass mark because they don't want to have a claim lower than 70% in their marketing. This is also applicable for things like television in the UK. It needs to be 70% to be able to get onto TV. But generally, I always say, 70% is good. You've got it passed. I say anything above 80% is great. Anything above 90% is absolutely excellent. So I tend to see it most in marketing. People tend to put things above 80% in there. But certainly I've seen many TV ads that have like 71% at the bottom of the screen, and I can't say it makes the product sell any less. I think I would probably just shout about your bigger claims more, but include all your claims on there that are at a pass mark. Okay. I'll give it a couple of minutes longer in case anyone's got any further questions before we close up today. So I don't think there's going to be any more questions come in. So I'll finish up for today, but I'll provide our contact details at the end from me and Thomas. So feel free to message us separately if you've got any further questions at all. So just to finish up, I just want to point your attention in the direction of the SCS. So the SCS have got their distance learning course, which can be accessed online. It's a recognised diploma in the essentials of cosmetic science. So if that's something you're interested in, if you're in a similar field or you're looking to enter the field, you might want to take their course. It's distance learning, so you can do it anywhere in the world. So you can have a little look at their website there. And there's also going to be the IFSCC Congress in London on the 19th to 22nd of September 2022. And you can register your interest for that now. Me and Thomas have got some more joint webinars planned, and there will be even more added to the calendar. But our next one's up and coming. We've got Trends in the Beauty Industry one coming up on the 3rd of September. So we'll be looking at a specific trend that's happening right now in the beauty industry and talking about how we can substantiate those kinds of claims.
Important to realize actually this is a Thursday, so we moved this for technical reasons, moved it from a Friday to a Thursday. So
I haven't updated it. Sorry.
No, I think you have. You just didn't mention it was a Thursday.
Oh right, yes, okay, yes. So yes.
So
it's going to be on a Thursday.
I think it's worth mentioning. That's going to be a Thursday.
No, that is a very good point to mention. Yeah, because usually on a Friday, but this will be on a Thursday. But yeah, I'll be clear. I'll send out an invite to this as well anyway. We've also got on the 18th of September why local does not exist anymore and the importance of an international outlook, which I think is super important, especially with what's happened in the last year, and people aren't shopping in stores as much anymore, they're shopping online, which means much more brands are going into more of an international kind of company, whether it's inadvertently or not. People from all over will be purchasing your products, or hopefully purchasing your products. And we're also going to do a webinar on how to create a good claim. We haven't got a date for that yet, but that will all be coming soon. So as I mentioned, there's our contact information. I did see one more question come in.
Yeah, exactly. Just one final question. Do percentage questions draw more attention or X out of X consumer set? Thanks. Thank you. No, I think it can't be generalized. It depends also on and I think it depends also a lot on the results, how you would phrase it. So X out of X is probably a way of rounding. So if you got 79 out of 100, you can say 8 out of 10 in a way of rounding, which makes it sound nicer. If you've got 84, you will still round down to 8, then you probably rather use 84%. Both is true, but it's a way of actually of making it a bit more standing out. So I think it depends on the situation. And again, there will be people for who the percentage is more striking. There will be others who don't understand percentages. We need to be realized actually that not everybody is so strong in percentage that another way is better. I think we can't generalize the answer. Or do we have a different view, Carys?
No, I completely agree. And I like the example I gave earlier of Skinny Tan, when they had all the percentages on the side and then their big advert was 9 out of 10 on their strongest claim. I think it's really nice to have a bit of a mixture. But yeah, and everyone said as well. Lovely. I was waiting for another question there. But yes, so there's mine and Thomas's email addresses and our contact information. Please feel free to follow us on LinkedIn as well. We're often posting our webinar information on there. As well as other information. And thank you very much for listening, and I'll be sending out the recording shortly, and have a lovely day.
Thank you. Thank you all. Bye-bye.